This is the Khoodeelaar television channel broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo editions. But this particular edition is continuing the updating of the Khoodeelaar TV channels, Baby Angel Geronimo Manifesto for Animals and Society. This is Saturday, the 20th of January 2024. One of the things that never, ever gets published by Fleet Street is what is referred to in today's I newspaper by the historian writing as a guest columnist, Bethany Hughes. And it is called Hoard or Hoarding. Now, Bethany Hughes is a historian who is probably the only English British one that has recognized at the time of the Muslims in Spain and the genocide of the Muslims by the Christians some hundreds of years ago. But her piece about hoarding is inadequate. She says that she's the world's greatest or biggest. Let's see what exact words she uses. She says that she speaks as the world's greatest hoarder. I don't believe so. She cannot be the world's greatest hoarder at all. How old is she? I'll check and update on her age and everything, but she cannot be the world's greatest hoarder, assuming the definition she's using. Let's check on her age. So Bethany Hughes is talking about the importance of hoarding, and she's talking about she's saying that the clutter of today could just be the historical resource of tomorrow. And with my worthless hoards, I'm never alone, always surrounded by connections to other places, to other people, and to their life stories. Well, that is only part of the description, only part of the definition. What the contents of the collections that I call collections represent, they represent life absolutely in the purest form in the process. When I was at the college called Murari Chand College in Silot in Bangladesh now in the 1960s, before Bethany Hughes was born, during the vacations, college vacations, I would carry my stuff. Well, the word stuff is there in her heading as well, but I would carry my stuff. Unlike any other contemporary of mine, I would always carry stuff that nobody else had. And I'd carry the stuff that would involve about 5 or 6 times as much complexities as would be experienced by my contemporaries, my fellow students. When I got home, unknown to me, the collections that I brought from college would be dispatched out of the house by my mother without telling me. She actually, in fact, absolutely originally treated my books, magazines, and other collections as clutter. I mean, she never consulted me. She assumed that I had some kind of mental deficiency, which meant that I carried stuff that I didn't need or I wouldn't understand, etc., etc. But that's the opposite of what it has been. It was the opposite of not understanding. It's the actual understanding more fully, understanding the world more fully than anyone else does. So how would I debate with my mother that what she had done was irreparable damage to my life, to the life of me and the lives of the millions of people that I actually represent, I actually am concerned about when I'm trying to collect these items of evidence. So it's not hoarding, it's evidence. Evidence of life as it is now. So my mother did that in the 1960s, let's say, and others have done the same thing in the 1970s, 80s, and they're still doing it. And finding this piece in the I newspaper by Bethany Hughes is absolutely thrilling, because this is a subject that nobody actually talks about. The fact that she gets the item less than complete is less important than the fact that this item is there at all and that she has written whatever she has written. I'll come to more of that shortly in this same edition. This is the BabyAngelGeronimo Manifesto for Animals and Society. And the Baby Angel Geronimo all the items that have been published about the So what she has actually done is do a conversion of her stuff into items that she can remotely locate in the distant past of history. But that's not what she should be doing. She should be talking about today and now, and her own breathing, and her own process of thinking, and her own surroundings, the environment. For example, when I sent the emails, well, I sent the text before. I texted about few hundred times to a telephone number that belonged to somebody that was supposed to have given the space in his factory in the commercial road in Tower Hamlets area in 1990, let's say, or 1989, to a man called Paul Varma. Now, Varma is an Indian, and I have edited his name and called him Paul Varmeen because he is the most poisonous criminal that had interfered with my collections over the 20 years that I made the collections at various addresses in East London. And the hosting of a meeting between this Paul Barmin and two other individuals that lived in the same address in new road in Tower Hamlets was about an agreement between Vermin and those two to get rid of my residence. In exchange for 40,000 pounds that Vermin promised them, so that they would get rid of my collections. And thereby they thought they would solve the problem. They thought it was an obstruction. All these collections, which I'll relate to the British Library and the Library of Congress and the Oxford University Library, etc., etc. They thought that these are things that can be disposed of. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every single item in my collection is unique, more unique than can be ever intensely defined unique. Unique literally, and also unique in the sense that each item uniquely represented a unique moment of identification of that process of life, community, environment that was ongoing, as well as the obstructions, the violations, and the darkest of darkness that surrounded this, as represented by the personalities of the Vermin and his two collaborators that lived in the same place where I was living, in the same address, that is. These people had no idea. Just like the scientist's dog had messed up the theory that the scientist had actually written, and the scientist exclaimed, "You know not what you have done." So the stuff that Bethany Hughes talks about is more important, more significant, more deeply knowledge containing, if you like, than she has expressed in this particular piece in the I newspaper on Saturday, the 20th of January 2024. I met a relation, a cousin of mine, who lived in Italy for, I think, about 15 years or so. I can't be exact about the length of time he lived in Italy for, but it will be more than 15 or maybe 20 years. And I had never met him for a very long time. In fact, since he was a child. So I met him in Watney Market. I was walking in Watney Market sometime about 10 years ago. And somebody, a Bangladeshi man and a woman, approached me suddenly. And he grabbed hold of me and he was putting me in an embrace, which to me was a complete shock because I didn't know what he looked like, because I remember him as a child and he wasn't a child, he was with his wife. So I had to physically remove him from me and I said, "What are you doing? Who are you?" And then he was disappointed that I had rejected him. I hadn't rejected him. I had tried to escape from the embrace of a stranger. To cut this short and to back to the collections that I was doing now. When he was a child, that would have been in the 1950s, in my village home in Silot. He was like contemporary to my younger siblings, because there are gaps of about 10 years between me and the siblings. And in the house, when I was still attending the village-based school, I had my collections. Nobody else had the number of books, items, magazines, etc. that I had, even at that stage. Nobody else. Nobody else that I had visited or I had seen had anything compared to the amount of items that I had in my collections. And all these years later, this cousin of mine was saying in a chance conversation that I would not have anticipated he would be having, held in the Whitechapel Road, near the junction between Whitechapel Road and Valence Road, that he remembered stealing magazines from my collection. He remembered this as an achievement. And I knew at the time it was happening, I asked my grandmother and I asked my mother what was happening to my books and stuff. And they couldn't explain. But I knew that they knew, and they were shielding my siblings and visitors like this cousin. Now, all these years later, decades later, this crime has been confessed to. Now, did he know any better than the dog that had destroyed the theory that the scientist had written? Did he have any clue as to what he was stealing? Because the collections that he stole, what was he stealing for? Was he stealing it for the pictures in it? Or was he stealing for any other kind of value that he could actually achieve by selling it or something, or flogging it off? Like my mother, when she got rid of my vacation time collections, she would send somebody from the village called a man called Muti. I would say that his name would be Motiur Rahman. The Muti was one of the people in the household next to us who would do the kind of odd job, if you like. And my mother must have paid him. My mother paid him to carry my stuff without my knowledge about 2 miles, because the physical distance would have been 2 miles there, because at that time there was no actual motorway that is now available between the place and our house. So she would pay him money to take my collections, books, magazines, newspapers, and to leave them, give them away to shopkeepers in the place called Rahadukkin Market. Now that is what my mother did. So my mother did that in the 1960s, before Bethany Hughes was born. And here was my cousin, who is a lot younger than me, confessing to stealing my stuff from my room, which was full of, it was like a part of a library, a branch of a library that you could see arranged books and magazines in perfect order. And when I would come back from a walk or some kind of talking to somebody or being in the shop or something, and find some collections missing, I could instantly notice that some items are missing. So I'd, in good faith, ask my mother, or if I saw my grandmother, what had happened. And they remained completely, absolutely committed to maintaining this silence about the conspiracy. They never told me. And to this day, I don't know what they knew. But I know that this cousin confessed to that. My own siblings never confessed, but they must have done this. What were the things? The things were, of course, by definition, magazine and newspapers are very contemporary and current. And books are, of course, of variety of references. But essentially, combined together, they actually added breathing, literally breathing, mental breathing, physical breathing, and my process of life. The knowledge that I had of my own surroundings and the knowledge that I was surrounded by all these information, which was far more authentic and reliable than anything that any of the human beings around me could actually represent. So if you look at the daily collections that I have, this is the definition. I have been collecting newspapers every single day. What does it mean? To give a measure, if you say a news agent in the conventional sense, before the internet came and the newspapers got slightly replaced by internet versions, there would be about 10 daily newspapers at any newsstand that I would buy. And on average, I would buy newspapers in Whitechapel, and those that are not available in Whitechapel, I'd go to Charing Cross, and etc., etc. On average, I'd buy about £4,000 in today's prices worth newspapers. So £4,000 worth of newspapers every year. So you multiply that, and whatever number of years that I've been doing this over, and you can see the amount of actual expenditure that I have made actively. So not only is it not hoarding, as if it's by accidentally, by accident it is there. It is not by accident there. It is intended, specific, targeted collection. Targeted so specifically that no scientific, academic, organized research institution would be as specific, as clearly aim at the collection. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and the British Library, these are two reference points, let's say, that the people refer to those and they go looking for information. Now, what I have done in the last, coming to 27 decades, I have been daily consulting, daily checking the facts for, let's say, 7 decades, facts that are not checked by any other known individual, even on a fraction of that kind of frequency. So when she says that she is the world's greatest hoarder, she has no idea just how wrong she is. And of course, she doesn't have any idea of the existence of me or my likes. And I don't believe that there is another person of my description anywhere on the face of the earth. When I say that my main modus operandi is that I ask questions. I'm not the inquisitor. I am the evidence-seeking, fact-seeking investigator. To such a level, such a height, that when I ask a question of somebody, 99% of the time, I do not get the answer that the question deserves. And objectively defined, the question actually deserves on anybody else's understanding of objective evidence. So, for example, when I had this encounter with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, when Brittany Hughes must have been only 2 or 3 years old, maybe 1 year old, maybe 2 years old, not 3 years. Because my encounter with Zulfikar Bhutto took place before 1969, I think. at the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, capital of Bangladesh. At that time, it was the provincial capital of East Pakistan. And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had just been sacked by then Field Marshal Ayub Khan, the martial law administrator, head of the martial law regime in Pakistan. And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had been sacked from his post as foreign secretary or foreign minister. And Bhutto was launching his party, what became the Pakistan People's Party. And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto visited East Pakistan, Dhaka, and the premier platform for public events, the Institute of Engineers, with a clear hope and aim and purpose to impress the elite of the young population, young individuals, with his talent and abilities and cleverness and his vision, but he never delivered those. Why didn't he deliver those? Because at the time he spoke for about 20 minutes. His introduction to himself and his scheme was interrupted by me. 1, 2, up to 9 questions I put to him. And 9 questions Bhutto, Z.A. Bhutto, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto failed to answer. And before I could ask the 10th question, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto became visually, evidently, very, very hot and red and angry and upset and annoyed and frustrated to such an extent that he turned right and he literally marched out of the Institute of Engineers and left Dhaka within hours. His dream of impressing the elite intelligentsia among the younger population, say under 30s, in East Pakistan completely faded and completely sabotaged by me. How did I do that? Because I asked questions. And the foundation of my questions, the foundation actually is in the collections. Because I get familiar with the evidence that is happening now, contemporary evidence, backed up by the contextual, continuous historic evidence of the past. And I prepare myself with the evidence, nothing else, no prejudice, no party, no affiliation whatsoever, only the evidence. So when I asked him questions number 1 to 9, Bhutto was not able to even work out what had hit him. He had no idea what had hit him. Because Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, up to that point of time, was the most widely reported, glamorized politician in Pakistan at that time. And he, I think, knew that he was the most glamorized and widely reported public figure in the politics of Pakistan at that time. Until that moment, when he was confronted by me, as I've explained before, I didn't go to that event with any intention of confronting him. I had no idea what would happen, except that I went there to observe what Bhutto would say. When I found that he was saying absolute rubbish, absolute ignorant, idiotic, egotistic stupidity, I knew that I had to tackle him. And I had to extract from him any evidence of actual truthful understanding and familiarity with what was going on in the world and what was going on in then country of When I met 10 years later, let's say in the next decade, I met the Prime Minister of India, Morarji Desai, at an event held in the India House in the Strand in London, near Holborn, on the River Thames. I asked him a question, and my question to Morarji Desai concerned the Commonwealth, and I'll come to the Commonwealth in the paper today, because in the Times today, the Indian origin Times writer has a piece headed "What the Commonwealth Purpose," etc., etc. So I shall deal with that one. But that is part of the collections that I referred to. If I didn't see that piece by this Times writer, I would not be able to contextualize and update the context and update the evidence and the narrative. So Bethany Hughes is wrong to call it Horde at all, because she must not concede. She must not concede to the representatives of darkness in the populations. It is only the representatives of darkness it's only the representatives of utter darkness in the populations today, or contemporary populations, that refer to the collections as hoarding. When the criminals based at the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre conspired, these criminals conspired to sabotage the remnant of democracy. I'll come to Morarji Desai later. I'll go back to that topic later, but I'm now dealing with the East London Mosque as a base used by criminals wearing the guise that they're doing some kind of Islamic work. They're not. These criminals fucked up by conspiring to erect the criminal post of elected mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. And when Andrew Gilligan did his research, he of course talked to the wrong people. He only talked about the Jamaat-e-Islami and the Islamic Forum Europe, etc., etc. But he didn't talk to me, most certainly didn't talk to me about any of this. Had he done that, his piece that was broadcast on the 1st of March 2010 on Channel 4 Dispatches would have been very seriously different. So when these criminals conspired to erect or foist a post called elected executive mayor, they did that without education, without learning, without any affiliation with the truth. All of those required them to have familiarity with the collections that I alone have been building for decades. And that collection, aspect of collection, gave me the evidence and the confidence based on the evidence that any member of the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets who would become a mayor, executive mayor in Tower Hamlets at the expense of Tower Hamlets, would be a disaster. Why? Was it because of the ethnicity? No. Because of the demographic, electoral politics, and organization, there was no way that any audit or accountability could be operated to hold that person holding that post to account. That is the lack of collections. And I was opposed to that post being created because I knew that the population, other than me, because of my association with an involvement with the collections daily, hourly, nobody would even understand the dramatic, detrimental impact that having an elected mayor in Tower Hamlets would have for the whole community generally, and for the particular What happened in the years that I defended the east end of London against the UK central government plot to dig a hole in Brick Lane under the auspices, under the kind of excuse of having a crossrail line. The Elizabeth line that is running now was called Crossrail Line during the project, and they included a plan to dig a big hole, a shaft that would have actually disrupted and destroyed Brick Lane environmentally for years, thus condemning the whole area to a wasteland. So I stopped that. Now this is something historic in a more deep sense than Bethany Hughes has shown understanding of. For example, all the petitions and all the various lobbies that the Little Englanders do from time to time to get their government to change its course, they end up being petitions and moaning. As I have said, the various inquiries that are held into various disasters and scandal, topically currently represented by the post office scandal, and then in the past by the Hillsborough disaster, the Hillsborough massacre of fans of Hillsborough, and the Scarman inquiry into the riots, police conduct in Brixton in 1981, and the Stephen Lawrence racist murder inquiry by Macpherson in the 1990s. All these inquiries, including the media inquiry by Levison, all these inquiries are hyped beyond tolerance. These inquiries are hyped to suggest that these will solve the problems, that these will actually compensate the victims of the scandal, each scandal, for the losses, the suffering, the heartaches that they've suffered. Currently, there is this COVID-19 inquiry ongoing. And soon, there will be this post office inquiry, of course, or post office scandal inquiries, because of the second one that is being prepared. Now, all these inquiries are hyped to the point of untenable kind of confidence in them, which the evidence does not support, because the inquiries are hyped to suggest that once ongoing, they will make up for the losses and the sufferings by the victims of each of the scandals. That never happens. What the inquiries has done for the last, let's say, 300 years in the United Kingdom is that it gives the false hope to the masses. And the masses are then thereby lulled into thinking that the inquiry will solve the problem. It never will. Because the inquiry is not the same thing as looking at the evidence of lying, looking at the evidence of immorality, looking at the evidence of racism, corruption, criminality, lack of compassion, and cruelty. So the inquiry should be replaced by a confession, an ethical, moral confession, whereby the perpetrators and their representatives and their excusers confess to lying, confess to committing literally sins. The baby angel Geronimo is the representative of the targets of sinful acts by the British state, the UK state. The baby angel Geronimo is the representative And therefore, the Baby Angel Geronimo Manifesto for Animals and Society will address a higher level of demands on the evil doing, wrongdoing criminals than all these inquiries combined together would be able to be able to deliver. And Baby Angel Geronimo's manifesto will be updated, as we have been saying, accordingly, with each edition of this particular program. And we'll come back to the topic of Spitalfields, Brick Lane, Crossrail in the next editions. Ending this particular edition at 58 minutes, 24 5 seconds.